Please welcome Coach Jim Tressel.
Sir. Thank you. I'm now down to 17 minutes. They have a clock here, but thank you so much. And you know you can believe everything you read in Wikipedia. So, but it was all fairly accurate. But it's true that I have flunked retirement. And so any of you that are considering retirement, don't, because you'll be busier than you were when you worked. And yesterday I was looking at my schedule for this week, and I thought, well, okay, we've got Troy Smith's golf outing Monday at Little Turtle, which was this morning. And it just so happened you mentioned Keith Byers. I only stayed for 9 holes of it because those guys get to going quite a long way. And so Keith Byers took my place for the back 9, and the 3 people I was riding with, I'm not a golfer, I didn't even bring clubs, but they were happy to see a golfer come with them. So we had Troy's outing, and we had this OEC event, and tomorrow morning I have to be in Pittsburgh at 9 o'clock and have events all day, and then I have to be in Youngstown tomorrow night for an event. Then Wednesday we have 2 events in Columbus, and Thursday an event in Youngstown and Cleveland. Then Friday I'm going to Syracuse University for 2 days to spend some time. I used to coach at Syracuse, and then Sunday we have a barbecue at our house where in a weak moment we agreed to host an auction barbecue for the James Cancer Hospital. And so I looked at those 7 days in a row, and like you do sometimes, I felt sorry for myself, and and I thought, my mom always taught me, you can't feel sorry for yourself. You look at your schedule, it is what it is. Get up early, have a great breakfast, and just go and just smile and be so excited you get the opportunity to serve. And so I got up early and driving. We live up in Medina, Ohio. I was driving down 71 to go to Troy's outing and stopped at one of those diners and sat down. And I thought, my mom's on my shoulder. She's telling me you got to have a great attitude and don't feel sorry for yourself. And so I sat down, and the waitress came over, and she didn't look very happy. She looked a little bit like I felt. And I said, well, here's my chance to perk up someone's day. She said, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'd like a little coffee and a couple eggs and maybe a few kind words. She looked at me, and he poured the coffee, and it was those coffee cups with the saucers, and the coffee cup's little, and the coffee goes in and slurps over the side and gets on the saucer, and you pick your coffee up and it drips on you, and you get about an inch and so forth. And she walked off to take the order in, and a little bit later she came back after I had my 1 inch of coffee. She had her coffee pot, and she plopped the eggs down and kind of looked at me sternly. She said, is there anything else I can get for you? And I said, well, I'd really like a little bit of coffee. And how about those few kind words? So she poured the coffee in and out. I knew I was going to drip it on me. And then she turned, and she had the all white on, and she put her hand on her hip, and she had the coffee pot. And she said, a few kind words, huh? If I were you, I wouldn't eat those eggs. I said, oh my goodness. But you know what? One thing, and I've talked to a lot of you as you came through the reception there and so forth, and you mentioned, hey, the last time I heard you talked about making sure you have an attitude of gratitude. And it's something we talked about every day. And we continue to talk about it every day. And we used to tell our players all the time that, of course, you're going to have a list of things that aren't perfect in the way you'd like them. But think about that list of your blessings. It is so much longer, and life is so much more fun if you live it with an attitude of gratitude. I mean, when we woke up this morning, thank goodness the oxygen was provided. We're blessed. I know the business you're in, let's face it, everyone assumes when they flip the switch, the lights are going on. But that's a blessing. Many people were behind that. Our list of blessings are so long. Every day we would begin the day with a team meeting, and we had a manual we called our winner's manual, and every day we had a page in the winner's manual, and we began the meeting always with a period we called quiet time. And quiet time it could be anywhere from 8 to 12 minutes, and it was kind of the kickoff to the day. You know, our students had been out on campus, and they had living their lives and so forth, but when they came to practice and to begin the meetings, we were only allowed so much time with them, and we had to maximize the use of that time. So we wanted quiet time to kind of just set the tone. And there were only two requirements in quiet time. One was they be quiet. So that was a goal that we worked on. And two, it was that in their winner's manual, they wrote down on the designated day that was on that page one thing they were grateful for. I don't care what it was. I got an A on my test. My mom's feeling better. My ankle's feeling better. I had a good practice yesterday. I don't care what you write. We want to begin our thinking in quiet time with that attitude of gratitude. And it's so amazing we probably had 25 or 30 former players there this morning, and the things that come up that they talk about, they never talk about the games, they never talk about their rings, they never talk about their championships. They talk about the things that they learned, and one of the things that they talk about most often is their regimen in their lives now, that they begin their days in quiet time. And that they write down what they're grateful for. And they think about that list of blessings versus that list of challenges. And one of the sportscasters was out there, and of course they always ask you the same question, like, what was your greatest victory, or who was your best player, or, all that kind of thing. And of course you can't answer them, because if you dare answer one guy and the other 3,000 or whatever say, what about me, But one of the sportscasters asked me, what was your greatest victory at Ohio State? And I've been asked that a million times and answered it the same way each time. And that's watching what these guys do now. Watching the husbands and fathers and businessmen, and sure, some of them went to the NFL, and none of them did it forever. That's why the NFL is not for long, NFL. That's why they called it that. But seeing what they became and seeing them talk about that attitude of gratitude and that appreciation. And so on behalf of, I don't think I read 377,000 households or something that you serve, thank you. My grandpa and grandma had a farm. And a lot of you I met were from Northwest Ohio, where they were from. And you serve so many people that, before 1935, they weren't served. And we appreciate what you do, and we appreciate your service, and we want to live our lives with an attitude of gratitude. But as he mentioned, I went from 37 years in coaching to all of a sudden I was an administrator. Well, that was a whole new world for me. And I really needed my quiet time. And we would sit in these meetings with all these people who had PhDs and all these letters. I didn't even know there was a provost. And I was 37 years in coaching. There's a provost? What does the provost do? What position does he play? And so I'll never forget sitting in one of those meetings with all those vice presidents and provosts and, chief legal counsel and, all this stuff. Sorry if there's any legal counsel here. My bad. I found out it's important. I remember one day we were in a meeting, and the one thing I realized about these higher education meetings, unlike business or unlike coaching, there was a lot of brilliance that needed to be discussed. And we were on a topic that was an important topic to me, and that was student success. And that's what I spent my whole life trying to help my students, who happen to also be football players, succeed, reach their potential. And so we were on this topic about how could we increase our student success and how could we get better at that and this and that. And then this one brilliant vice president said, well, the data clearly shows. How many meetings have you been in when they lead with the data clearly shows, right? The data clearly shows that the single most important trait or characteristic that one must develop in order to reach their potential, to be their best. And I'm like falling out of my chair. I've been working for like 38 years trying to figure out what trait do we need to develop to be our best. And I was waiting. And she said, cognitive ability. I said, damn. Cognitive ability? Cognitive ability? Oh, cognitive ability? And like my mind was racing. And I wasn't sure that I agreed. I had my dad kind of sitting on my shoulder, reminding me of what he used to always tell us. He would say, you will have 1,000 opportunities in your life to keep your mouth shut. Never miss a chance to keep your mouth shut. And on the other side, I had but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Cognitive ability. So I started thinking, what is cognitive ability? And I was trying to kind of go back to my coaching years, and I thought, well, our guys that knew their assignments and they could make good decisions and those kinds of things, they were good. They were versus some of the guys that couldn't and so forth. But I thought, and I thought, well, maybe what she was talking about, cognitive ability, you could kind of just say, maybe that's talent. Because she was kind of saying, well, if you're smarter or if you're more talented, maybe that's what she was talking about. And I thought, but man, I don't even know if always the most talented people reach their potential or the most talented teams reach their potential. So I thought, well, I'm gonna listen to my dad. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I know this meeting's gonna last a long time because I'd gotten used to the fact that I spent 37 years and as a head coach 25 years, and I had to make a decision every 25 seconds. I learned in higher ed we made one every 25 months. And so I knew that there was a lot more discussion that needed to be had. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use this time and not start a debate and make the meeting longer. And I'm going to think through, well, if I was going to begin that argument, what would I say is more important? If that's talent, let's say that cognitive ability is talent. If talent's not the most important thing, what is? So I started daydreaming and had plenty of time to think about it during this meeting. And so on the little agenda sheet, I wrote down 5 numbers, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, kind of in descending order. And I thought, well, I do know that talent's important. Cognitive ability is important. There's no doubt. I mean, the more talented our players were, the smarter they played, whatever, we had a better chance of being successful. So there's no doubt we need talent. We need cognitive ability. We need to become competent at whatever it is, we do. And so, but where is it in the top 5? Well, I decided I was going to make my top 5. And what's fun is, my top 5 are mine. You can make your top 5. But I'm going to share with you real quickly what I think the 5 non-negotiables are if we're going to reach our potential individually, if our group is going to reach its potential as a group, if our team's going to become the best it can be. And here's real quickly what I came up with in that long meeting. I won't keep you in a long meeting because they got a clock. I'm already down to 0. How could I be at 0 already? Yeah. So here's what I decided in descending order. The 5th most important thing that I decided that we couldn't do without, and you think about your team or you think about your desire to reach your potential individually, in my mind, number 5, non-negotiable, got to have it, never seen one that didn't have it, and that's work ethic. You got to work at it. One thing I heard for 9 years as a college president, as I would talk to business and industry and people coming to recruit our students, they talked a lot about the fact that, the students coming out these days have really good knowledge. Our engineers knew engineering, our accountants knew accounting, our nurses knew nursing, our teachers knew how to pedagogy of teaching or whatever, but could use a little bit more work ethic. We need it takes a lot of work to be good. To be really good, to reach your potential, to be the best that you can be, we can't lose sight of the fact that it takes a bunch of work. And if you think about your life's journey, or you think about your parents' life's journey, or your grandparents' life's journey, it was a lot of work. And one thing that we felt with our students, our players, if we could just make sure they understood that, when they went on out into life, if they would just have that work ethic, they'd have a chance. They'd have a chance. Well, I decided that the 4th one, in descending order, not as, more important than the 5th one, but not as important as the first 3, 2, and 1, was that talent component. You really do need to have an ability to do what you're trying to do. I mean, I could practice basketball 18 hours a day, and I'm not making the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, it's not happening. So you do need to have a certain level of competence and talent to reach your potential at what it is you're trying to do. So I'll go with her on that, but I'm only giving it number 4. Because as I thought about it, and I thought about the great players that we had, the players that Coach D'Antonio was with us, and then he was at Michigan State, and he used to always say that an impact player was a player on our team that raised everybody else up and that reached their potential. And we had a lot of impact players. And those impact players absolutely had great work ethic, most assuredly had talent and worked hard to improve their competencies. But they also had something that not everyone had, and that was my number 3, which was curiosity. The really good players were curious as to how they could get better. The really good teams were curious as to how they could get better. They didn't listen to everyone saying they're wonderful and, you've got it all figured out and you're just as good as it gets. And they just were curious. as to how we could get better. And there were some of the teams I had that, quite honestly, worked hard, had great talent, but all of a sudden got to a certain level, and instead of being curious, that other C word crept in, became complacent, and then we didn't reach our potential. We worked extremely hard to help our guys stay curious at getting better. Every day that we practiced, we filmed everything from about 5 angles. As soon as we came off the field, we watched the practice film, and every day they were graded. Every single day they got a grade, because we wanted them to be curious about how can they get better. We wanted to help them to develop that curiosity. Those years that we had extraordinary years, we studied a book every year with our team, but after we had one of those extraordinary years, we studied the same book. And the book was entitled, all right, I'm going to, since you were on the conference call, I'm going to see if you can answer this. Every year after we won the national championship, we would read the same book. And it was written by Robert Kriegel, and it was entitled, If It Ain't Broke, I'm going to need a little more time with this team. Missy said, if it ain't broke, and she whispered, don't fix it. You weren't following my, Missy. I said, we have to remain curious. We can't ever have that moment where we think we've arrived. Break it. If it ain't broke, break it. And find a better way. The book is about American businesses that didn't do that. They followed the Missy rule of thumb. And the Missy rule of thumb is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it and let the other company overpass you. Because the competition's working hard too. People are trying to find a better way. They're watching your film all the time. They're going to figure out how to beat you. If you think they're not studying you, they can't wait to put to use what they've learned about how they can do it better than you. And so I always felt that, and when I put my list of 5 together, I felt that of course we have to work hard. And of course we have to be talented and be competent at our skills and so forth. But we better remain curious. We better remain curious as to how we can get better. We need to do that as a country. We need to do that as a company. We need to do that as an individual. So what could be more important than work ethic, talent, and curiosity? In my mind, that number 2, not quite my number 1, but my number 2 was that grit. Because what I saw with individuals was some of them worked extremely hard, had very capable talent, remained curious and constantly studied how they could get better. But occasionally, if they got punched in the nose and the ball bounced the wrong way and something unfortunate happened, whether they caused it or they didn't, that guy with the lack of grit didn't reach their potential. On the other hand, I had a lot of guys that worked hard, talented, curious, and you know what? When adversity struck, they were not going to let them stop that. We talked constantly about handling adversity. We talked constantly about handling success. Because both things are going to happen, right? The lights are going to go on, and they're going to be going on. Then there's going to be times when the lights don't go on. And adversity struck. There's going to be times when the game plan worked. Every game, we had a game plan. And we went out there and we hoped that the game plan was the right plan. But inevitably, they're allowed to practice. They're allowed to try. they're allowed to try new things. They're allowed to compete. And inevitably, throughout the course of the game, sometimes the game plan doesn't work. Or maybe sometimes we don't execute it as well as we could have. But whatever, there's going to be moments where it doesn't go right. A little bit like life. There's going to be moments in life that it doesn't go the way you'd hoped. You didn't get the promotion you thought you were going to get. The ball didn't bounce your way. We used to talk all the time about the law of progression. If you were here at point A and you wanted to get to point B, from A to B is not linear in life. It's not linear in business. It's not linear in football. The path from A to B may begin linear, but ultimately there's a little blip that happens. You slip, you fall, they do something good, something unforeseen, nothing that we could have, but a blip happens. And then you get back on the line. And you're going toward your goal, and then inevitably a blip happens. There's not much good about getting old. I hate to give you that bad news. But there are two things good. One is your huddle gets bigger. I've got like 4,000 names in my phone. Rings every day with former players, former coaches, former people we've had a chance to be around. That's awesome. There's nothing better. The other good thing that happens is when you get to a certain age, and I just arrived, I'm 71 and a half. You get to a certain age, you can predict the future. And I've now got there. And that's pretty cool. I can predict the future. Craig, would you like me to predict your future? Okay. I'm going to predict Craig's future right here in front of 324 people. Huh? Craig's future will be a combination of the things that he worked for, planned for, was excited that would occur, and some things that he can't believe happened, that he really didn't plan for, he didn't foresee. Because that's the way our life is. And talk to students all the time about the fact that, I know you've done a great job and you got straight A's and, you think you're going to go and you think everything's going to be wonderful. That's not the way life is. That law of progression has blips. The key to getting to that point B is make your blips short and get back on the line. The minute you let the blip happen and really get to you emotionally and mentally and psychologically and you start wondering about it, and that blip goes down, and it all of a sudden the time and effort and resources it takes to get back up on that line is amazing. That person that has that grit, that has developed that ability to understand, I know there's going to be blips. It's going to happen. And that's okay. When we would talk to our players about going from play to play, it was real simple. When the play ended, you took a megasecond to figure out, did I play my assignment properly? Did I step with the right foot? Did I have the right gap? Was I in the right zone? Did I block the right guy? Whatever. Quickly, you got to think through, evaluate your performance. And then secondly, you look over the sideline and there's the chains and you say, okay, well, here's the situation. Okay, it's 2nd and 7. Okay, I know the situation. Then you look to the sideline and you get the next call because there's a new defense called or a new offensive play. And you have to you have to have learned from that last play, but that last play can't start a dip because if you're thinking about that last play, you play the next play, then the dip goes further. You're thinking about it, all of a sudden you're thinking about it through the third quarter or whatever, and then it's too much to climb out of in the course of the game. But that person that develops that grit, that understands that there's going to be adversity, and that how my success is determined is how do I handle the hard times? How do I handle the hard times when it didn't go the way I'd hoped? When my goals weren't met? When my dreams were burst for the moment? Developing that grit. And that's something that we talk to educators about all the time is, hey, let's make sure that our young people understand that there's going to be tough times. That's why in practice, we created those tough times. We wanted to make sure they understood in practice, it's not going to be perfect either. We wanted to create adversity so that we could train ourselves to handle adversity, to develop that grit. So to us, that was more important than how hard you worked, more important than your talent, even more important than your curiosity is, could you handle the tough times? And if they could learn that in our laboratory of life, they could take that on into their real life. And you know you have people that work with you and work alongside of you, and you know stuff happens. That's just the way it is. How well do we handle the tough times? I mean, I guess I'm speaking to the choir, because when there's a tough time in your business, whoo. So what could be more important than those four? What could be my answer to the question that the other person's answer was cognitive ability? Ooh. I met a lot of you, and when we were in that other room, and a lot of you should be happy that the answer is not cognitive ability. So, just kidding. Oh, they're really laughing at him back there. Here's my number one. And again, I think it's a fun exercise. That's what's neat about coming together once a year, twice a year, whatever you do. It's, you come and you learn from each other, and you think about, what problems have you had, how'd you solve them, and what's the new technology, and you hear the newest, greatest things, and I know you have a long day of all that tomorrow, and that's great. But I think the other good thing is when you come together on things like this and then you go back home, you've had, 24, 48 hours, and you've had a chance to reflect away from the fray, because, when you're back there, it's nonstop. And so I'd encourage you to think about what your five are. But here's my number one. All right, Missy, I'm going to give you another chance. I'm a believer in second chances. What's your number one? What's the single most important trait that would allow someone to reach their individual potential so they impact the group, or a group's single most important trait that would allow them to be as successful and serve the needs of others as they possibly can? Matt's laughing at you, by the way. You have several? You only get one? And hey, by the way, there's no wrong answer. She gave me the wrong answer on the other question, but this one does not have a wrong answer, okay? Servant leader. Okay, that's a great one. It's not mine. It's all good. And that's what's beautiful about life, is we could all decide, just like that lady said, cognitive ability. I can't believe it. But anyway, here's mine. And I thought about those great players, those impact guys, not just the stars, but I mean the guys that impacted the group, that you might not have even known their names. Or those teams that you were like, wow, did they accomplish? They reached their potential. They became the best they could. My number one is selflessness, which is a little bit like the servant leader thing. But people ask, well, Coach, you were a head coach for 25 years and 9 of your teams played for the national championship. What was it about them that helped them raise to that level? And I thought about those teams. And you know what? it was about them? The ones that got closest to reaching their potential, and it wasn't all just the ones that played for the national championship. Some teams that were 7-4, it was a miracle that they were 7-4. But those teams that reached their potential were selfless. It wasn't about them individually. It was about the group, the team. It really wasn't until our teams understood. They always wanted to be national champions when we first got to Youngstown State. Coach, we want to be the national champions and this and that. We kept getting better and so forth. And it wasn't until they realized that until they believed it was bigger than what it would impact them, till they realized it was bigger than them, they couldn't really reach their potential. When it was about, well, I want to win a ring, or I want to win a championship, or I want that notoriety, when it was about that, it was a little bit harder to be that selfless. When they realized it was bigger than that, and they were playing for more than just what it would do for them individually, that's when we reached our potential. I'll give you two quick stories, and I'm still at 0, but I know we have time for Q&A, and the salads are getting old, but two quick stories about that bigger than us, selfless reason why I believe that. One, 1991, we were coming back. We had played for the national championship at Youngstown State over at Statesboro, Georgia. I met a couple Georgia folks here today. They claimed they were Buckeye fans, but I don't know. But anyway, and we played against Marshall, and it was a great game. We won 25-17. We fly back to Youngstown. There's like 10,000 people. 10,000 people at the airport. Never saw anything like it. And I mean, it took an hour plus to get through the airport to get to our buses to go home. And then when we got on the buses, it was about a 7-mile trip down Belmont Avenue was the name of the street. And it was lined for 7 miles with people beeping their horns, and all the storefronts had national champs on it and so forth. But when we got back to the bus, after we got through the airport, just like every other coach or tour guide or whatever, is everyone here? Did we count noses? We didn't leave anyone back. I mean, it's melee here. And they said, yeah, coach, everyone's here. And so I was just getting ready to step up onto the bus step. And this was like December 21st or something, so it was cold. And we were, back in those days, we were all dressed up, and we had top coats and all this and that. And I'm just stepping up, and I feel this tug at my top coat. And I look back and step back away from the bus, and there was this older guy, and he was crying. And I just kind of looked at him, and he's just bawling. Little short guy, and he said, Coach, this is the greatest day in my life since VE Day. I'm like, I was just like stunned. And so I kind of looked down, and then I looked back, and he was gone. He was gone. So I got up and got in the bus, sat down in my seat. We're driving down that Belmont Avenue, people beeping and this and that. And all I could think about was that guy. And I thought, I wonder what his story is. And to this day, I don't know who that guy was. I wonder if he immigrated to this country and went to work in the steel mills, because that Youngstown area, that was how the whole city was developed. I wonder, I bet he immigrated there. And I wonder if he went and served in the war. And as I was daydreaming, I thought, I wonder if when he got back, he went back to work in the steel mills, And then in 1977 on Black Monday when we lost 42,000 jobs in one day, I wonder if he lost his job. And all I could think about was him. And all I could think about was maybe there wasn't a whole bunch of good things that happened between VE Day and that day. And our guys gave him the joy that he said he hadn't felt for 40-some years. And the other one that plays in my mind heavily is when we went out there to Tempe and played against Miami, and they were favored by whatever, 18 points or something, and we won and so forth. The mail that I got was mind-boggling. Things like, I can die happy now. I didn't think I'd see the Buckeyes win the championship again. And I'm thinking, wait a minute now. It's not that important, you know. And I remember where I was sitting. I remember talking to my dad, and, you know, he was near the end of his life. And it just reminded me that if you're going to reach your potential, if you're going to have your biggest impact, he's from Miami. He's out, man. He said, I'm out talking about my alma mater. But we can have the biggest impact when we understand it's not about me. And that's hard. We talked all the time about training to be selfless must be intentional. It must be talked about every day. We have to understand how hard it is, because naturally we're selfish. We just are. We all are. And we have to constantly have that voice in our head to remind us that every action we take, if it can be taken in a selfless manner as to impacting bigger than its impact on me, we'll have a chance to reach our potential. We'll have a chance to make a difference. We were always nervous before we went out and played a game. I don't care who we were playing. We thought we'd prepared hard. We thought we were capable. We were confident. We believed in ourselves, but we were always nervous. So the last thing we would say before we would go out of the locker room for 25 straight years, every single game, was our reminder to each other of what we needed from one another. And really, to us, that's all that life's about, is if all of us can do what we can do, what role we play, if all of us will do that, that's all we can expect of each other, and we'll be fine. But we're still nervous. So we had a little poem that we said, and it was written by Edward Everett Hale, and it was about 8 verses long. We were a football team. We did one verse. We would have missed the kickoff if we did 8 verses. But I can tell you, our guys, if you run into any one of them, they could tell you what we said to one another, what we said together every single time in that nervous moment before we went out and started the game. And the poem went like this: I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And that I can do, I ought to do. And what I ought to do, by the grace of God, I shall do. And really, that's all we needed, right? If all of us, whatever role it was we played, if it was all about the team, if it was all about whatever we could do on behalf of one another, then, yeah, we'll still be nervous, but there's a good chance we'll be fine with the results. And with that, I'm opening up the Q&A. Rich, hey, look, it's been 0 the whole time. So you can't, Mr. Roberts screwed this whole thing up. I mean, with that long introduction, you know.
Just a
So we have time for a half a question.
Yes, few quick ones, very quick.
Not the whole question. Come on, come on. I know there's brilliant people here. Oh, here we go. Wait a minute. Oh, you already proved you're not brilliant. No, no. What are the teams in the Big Ten in 10 years? You know, there's a chance that there won't be something called the Big Ten. Don't know. I think the fact that we like that Big Ten TV network check, we're going to have something like that, right? I don't know the answer, but can I tell you what I hope? I hope we get to the point, and I've hoped this for 20 years, I hope we get to the point where we take the 70 or 80 truly Power 5 schools and we create a league. And I would like it to be geographic. And then, you know, a little bit like the NFL, AFC North and this and that. Although theirs is a little crazy with teams here and there. I think we could make the Big Ten, the 10 teams that we normally have, you know, plus Notre Dame. Who else could be close by? Maybe Iowa State in there with Iowa. You know, I mean, we could figure that out and make a truly geographic major conference. But like most things slip in inches and then they crash, right? And then to build them back up takes time. Well, for 50 years, we should have seen the revenue in college athletics going like that, yet we didn't decide to share it with the people that were playing it, and we never made the right decision in my mind, and so then it crashed. And so it's going to take a minute, but I hope we get to a major conference. Now, here's what's scary, is it's going to negatively affect something because people got used to spending the money they spent. Well, now they're going to need to share the revenue, which should be done. But then who's not getting that money that used to go somewhere? Well, it's going to affect our Olympic sports. It's going to affect our smaller divisions. But things slip in inches, and I don't know. The one I would love to see in the Big Ten is Notre Dame. I mean, I would love to. I just think they're so naturally, you know, geographically tied. But next question.
Hey, Jim. I'm curious, especially...
Curious? See? He listened.
Especially...
Missy, did you hear that? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's not his deal. He's curious. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I get excited when my students learn.
Especially considering how much success that you've found professionally, personally, in the time since. How do you look back on the circumstances surrounding how you left Ohio State?
You know, the greatest lessons I've learned, both personally and professionally, have been after the most difficult situations. And the biggest lesson I learned was my mentor said to me, he was a retired English professor, and he was like, everyone needs someone who will close the door and say, hey, look, you know, not sure you're thinking right or whatever. So just as we were leaving Ohio State, he said to me, you do know that your greatest impact is ahead of you. Well, I wasn't feeling it. I said, well, Doc, He said, listen to me. He said, your greatest impact is ahead of you, if you believe it is. And to me, that was the challenge. Almost challenging my personhood, right? Like, you can sit and whine and you can, you know, mope and whatever. But do you think your greatest impact is ahead of you? And so I don't care if it's personally, just like I said, everyone's going to have adversity individually, collectively as teams, as companies, as, you know, consortiums, you know, I'm not even sure what you guys do, cooperatives, okay, cooperatives, you know, whatever. I never said I was an expert about this. But tough things are going to happen. They just are. And how you react to them and how you respond to them, to me, is what you're all about. And so, but it's just like that play that you learn something from. Well, it's that situation at the office you learn something from. Or that situation working with a personnel, situation you learn something from. Devastating things. Our teams learned the most from the toughest games they lost. They just did. Because sometimes when things are going right, you think you had something to do with it. And all of a sudden, you lose that curiosity, you lose that grit, you lose that maybe work ethic. You lose all that because I'm wonderful. And so there is nothing wrong with adversity. There is nothing wrong with having tough things happen. And that's one thing I'm an education guy, and one thing I get nervous a little bit about as I watch education a little bit is, are we allowing young people to get roughed up? Because if they don't get roughed up, I don't know how they're going to learn. I don't know how you learn if you don't lose. I was in a high school one time. I hate to say this, I'm over my time limit, but now you hit my hot button. So I was in this high school, and they said, they invited me to come talk to their honors kids. I said, okay, great, I'd love to. They said, okay, Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock, whatever. So I got to the school and went to the office and said, I'm here to talk to the honors students that have a 3.5 and above. And they said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll take you down. And so they take me down. They walk me into the gymnasium. Thinking, this is kind of weird. I'm going to talk to a small group of people in this big room. Can't they find me a classroom or something? But whatever. So the bell rings, and all of a sudden people are filing into the gymnasium. And the gymnasium's full. And I'm thinking, man, this school's bigger than I thought. Because if there's this many people with a 3.5 or above, and the gym's full, this must be a giant school. So I said to the guidance counselor, I said, how many people are here today with a 3.5 or better? And she said, 1,200-ish. I said, 1,200? I said, well, how many people are in the school? This is a way bigger school than I thought. She said, about 1,600. I thought, wait a minute. I was in high school. 3 out of 4 of my guys weren't above a 3.5. I'm going to tell you that right now. And so sometimes I worry about, are we trying to keep adversity from happening to our young people? Because if you don't build your adversity immunities when it happens, because it's going to happen. And so it says in the scriptures to be thankful for your tribulations. Now, you don't feel that way right off the bat, but it's the truth. There is nothing tough that ever happened to me that didn't help me a bunch. And so, to me, that was the way you handled, whether it be a very public situation or the, tons of private situations that you have. You learn from them, you figure out where you're going to be better, and then you decide that I'm going to have even more impact in the future than I've ever had. Any other? Missy will give you the last question. Oh my. Missy's going to be mad she was on that conference call we had. It's the only person in the room I really know. We'll get one. Okay, last one over there. This is the last one because, the poor guy, the steaks are going to be well done or whatever.
What is your view?
I don't think he needs that. He's not happy.
Can you hear me down there? What is your view about college students or football players, basketball players getting paid now? Like I think I've heard today on WLW that the quarterback from Ohio State's getting like $2.3 million for playing there on this, whatever you call NIL or whatever. What is your view on that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think it was a shame that the student athletes weren't included in the spoils as the spoils were getting giant. To me, that was not right. But that was the rules of the game. Well, now it exploded, and the rules of the game is there are none. And so that's the rules of the game. And so you can decide that you don't like the rules of the game, or you can be the best at the rules of the game. And if there's no rules, then you can be at the best at raising money. And the Ohio States and the Texases and the USCs and the Michigans, I mean, they're going to be fine. I worry about all the rest, but maybe what I worry about the most is, have we decided that the value of playing collegiate athletics is money? I mean, are we just saying it's money versus all those other things that playing, I don't care if it's playing in the marching band or on the Baja Engineering race team or it's on the football team, the values of being in a team situation and a team learning experience, the values of that are lifelong. Unfortunately, that money, it disappears fast. So what's my feeling about it? I feel terrible that we allowed it to get to this. We should have, and we talked for decades. But the rules of engagement stayed the rules of engagement. And like anything else, if it's not right, eventually it's going to blow up. And it did. Now, I hope it gets fixed. We're going to need some guardrails. I hope student athletes can get part of the gigantic revenue. I hope there aren't too many fatalities along the way with other sports and other divisions and all that kind of thing. I hope we can get some sense to it. But right now, the rules of engagement are raise as much as you can, and that's what's going on. And I guess there's a third thing about getting old. I don't have to coach in that right now. So maybe there's a third thing. But it's tough, and I mean, it's the whole transfer portal thing. I always tease my guys from back at Youngstown State that were on those great teams. They say, would you have left me in the portal back if there was a portal back then, if they flashed some money at you? And they would have. And is that healthy? I mean, it's the kids were talking about it out at the golf course today. Some of our guys were saying, I wonder if they'll have that brotherhood of that time we spent, we were all broke and we were all together. And I wonder what their conversations are going to be like when maybe they only played together for 6 months or 9 months or 2 years or, but again, I was talking with one of the people today that came through. Really, the only thing constant is change, and we better manage the change, and we need to come up with what are the values that we're looking for from intercollegiate athletics and get some guardrails. And they're petrified about the legal system because they've lost in court every single time, and that's been a little bit of a problem, but I wish I had a better answer to that question, but I hope we get some good people in the room and try to figure it out. But until then, all we can do is each and every one of us do what we can do. And if we'll do that, we'll get through it and the results will be fine. And with that, I think I'm being booted off the stage. Thanks so much. God bless. Go Bucks. Are we still friends? Okay. All righty.